Anita? I think we're ready for you. Oh, and just quickly, folks, I forgot to mention, my name today is listed as Jackie Hefner. She actually works here at Pacific Northwest Publishing also, and I just had to use her account today. So know that the host, me, Jackie Hefner, is Nick Roy, and you can message me with any issues. Anita, we're ready for you, Anita. Let me see.
Anita, I can't hear you. I know, but I can't. I know, honey, I can't hear you. Are you there? So, yes. And I didn't change anything. Okay, good. And and you can see me. Okay, we're great. I'll turn off the phone and we'll start. Beautiful. Okay, so welcome to this webinar. I am so honored to do this webinar for Pacific Northwest Publishing. As I look across here, practical, positive, proven, isn't that the truth? And let me just tell you how this topic came about. So I'm working with two schools, many schools, but two schools who had as their focus this year to read as much as they could about equality, one school, and equity, the other school, and asked if I would then lead them on sort of a path to look at equality and equity through the lens of instruction. And so I read one article after the next. And there's lots of very good articles. Mostly they look at the fact that there is differences in treating students in different ways across ethnic background, across race, across handicapping condition, and also some very good evidence that we as humans have some bias that maybe we're totally unaware of. And so I read all of these, and then I said, I'm still not really clear about equality and equity, and in terms of looking at instructional practice. So a few weeks ago, I was in New York City, and I was working on this issue. I had a huge stack of articles to read, so I headed to one of my favorite little places to eat in Upper West Side, and it's one of those that you go in and you get a bowl, and I got the bowl, and they say, do you want kale or rice? I know I should take kale. I took rice, and then what vegetables do you want? What do you want as a protein? What do you want to drink? Do you want a nice green tea? No, I would really prefer coffee. So I sat down. And I had brought my computer. It's the kind of place that they don't mind if you stay and read for a long time and write for a long time. So that's exactly what I started doing. And then I looked up on the wall. And on the wall, they had some signs that greeted everyone who came into this little cafe. And it actually gave me inspiration in terms of equality and equity. And so it said, our promises. Now, this is exactly what was there. I just took a picture of it and then redid it for you. Welcome to our cafe. These are our promises to you. Oh, I said, okay, promises to everyone. Our food will always be of the highest quality, organic, fresh, locally grown when possible, healthy, delicious. Our food will be prepared fresh every day in our clean, professional kitchens. Our delicious recipes will be consistently used and shared. You will be glad that you ate at our cafe. I said, okay, so what they're saying is, no matter if you get the kale or you get the rice, or if you get the vegetables, or if you add protein, that it's going to be the highest quality, and everybody's going to be guaranteed that high quality. I said, yes, okay. And then right next to it, they had a poster that perfectly represented not equality, but equity. And so it said, let us meet your special needs. Vegetarian, vegan, nut-free, gluten-free, lactose-free, South Beach diet, Mediterranean diet, raw food diet, the zone diet. I don't even know what the zone diet was. But so, yes, we're going to guarantee the quality, but we're also going to be flexible to meet your special needs, which is equity. And I said, this is exactly the perfect analogy for looking at quality and equity together. And then I glanced over one little bit to another sign that they had, but here is what I decided from this, is that what they're really promising is equality. And have you ever noticed in the word equality is the word quality? Well, not till I started reading everything I could about this did I notice that. Equality contains quality. And so everybody gets quality food, and all of these things are going to occur no matter what you actually order. It will mean of these, like in the classroom, that there'll be a quality that everyone will get. So I said to myself, and equity meets your needs, that your special needs are met. And that's exactly what we want in our schools, is equality, quality for everyone, but also responsiveness to your special needs. So they had one more little point. This was a poster that was up, and note to self, be kind, be kind, be kind. I said, oh my goodness, we have a perfect analogy here, quality of instruction, but also flexible enough with equity to meet individual needs, and that student-teacher relationship, be kind, be kind, be kind. Now, I actually have in my home a poster, so I knew that the author was Henry James. 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. And I have never met a leader in positive behavioral supports who did not have that as their intentionality to be kind. So I said, maybe I should write a manifesto of quality and how it relates to equity from the lens of instruction. So that is what I sat down to do, to have in that cafe equality, quality for all, equity, individual needs are met, plus kindness in the student and teacher relationship in the climate of the school. So I was very glad. I ate there and went back many nights, continuing to work on this presentation. So many of you are involved in response to instruction and intervention, which is a structure totally designed for equality, quality for all, equity, individual needs are met, and student-teacher relationship beginning with deep kindness. So let me just share my manifesto through the lens of which my whole career has been bent on, through the lens of instruction, and see if it matches your own. So I wrote down 7 that we're going to look at, and I'm certain that they will be in total resonance of your thinking. And you might notice that in bold is learning, because what we want in terms of equality is quality instruction for all in every class, every day, for this day, for the next day, for this year, for the next year, for eternity. We want quality instruction for everyone that leads to learning, and more 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 learning. Every major principle that we have in regards to instruction has as the outcome learning. So that is exactly what I included at the end of every one of these 7 factors. I'm sure there might be some more that you could add, but I tried to pare it down, and 7 seemed like a perfect divine number. So let's look at each, in which we're going to look at quality, but then we might also have to look at equity in terms of individual students. And if we could do it through this kind of practice, we could even be able to have practice that overcomes any biases that we're totally unaware of, because we probably do have some that we're unaware of. So let's start on this journey, which all of you have been on for a long time, I think. So number one, that in my manifesto, if we want equality, quality instruction for all, then we have to focus the learning on critical content, because there's a lot of content out there with limited times, and if I want to make a difference, then I have to hone in more directly on what is going to make the most difference. For example, in writing, I might want to be certain that students can write a quality sentence, that it be a sentence that is coherent, and for many kids that is a big goal, but it is the foundation of all other things we write. So if you haven't gotten a copy of Judith Hochman's book on the writing revolution, you just need to Google it now, because it's an excellent book. But one of the areas we also have tremendous knowledge of is in the area of reading. And that if we want children, whether they're in general ed or special ed, to gain reading skills, we have to teach print concepts such as letter names. Phonemic awareness has ever-growing importance as we gain more knowledge on this, that they can segment and blend sounds, that they can do decoding, that when they see a word in print, that they could say the sounds and recognize the word, and that they would also gain sight vocabulary, and sight vocabulary leads to fluency, and that they would have vocabulary and background knowledge. I was reading a recent article in The Atlantic that was a group of researchers in the area of comprehension who reminded us that you have to be able to read the words, decode the words, but that the best predictors of comprehension is vocabulary. Do I understand the words? And do I have background knowledge? And that leads to comprehension. So if we are teaching reading, then we have to say, I'm going to focus on these areas because they're going to make the most difference. And this would be quality instruction for a kindergarten student. I just returned from Australia for 2 weeks, and I almost said prep students. So yes, those prep students or kindergarten students, that we would begin to teach these to mastery, and so that they would be able to have the reading skills that they need. But we could also look at this in terms of equity. And so if you have a RTI at your school, you could look at this as tiers 2 and tier 3, or you could simply look at it in terms of students who need equity, that they may need some change in the content. So one thing we might do is narrow the focus to the most important knowledge, skills, and vocabulary that they need. So let's just take, let's say we're reading an informational article, and I'm working with students that are receiving strategic intervention, and I say to myself, there are 20 words that they don't know, but I'm going to narrow it, and I'm going to teach them 5 totally generalizable, totally critical content to mastery. And then the other 15, as we read the article, I'll just tell them the meaning as we go. So I'll narrow the focus, make it more intensive so that they're able to do that. And sometimes we have children that the discrepancy is so great that for them to have equity, they need an alternative curriculum, maybe even alternative focuses, because what is necessary for them is different than from other children. And then the third big idea is breaking it down. So just this last week, I was talking to teachers about teaching the concept and actualization of a topic sentence. And if I want to teach it, I'm not just going to tell them a topic sentence is a sentence that tells the topic and the major point that is going to be covered with details in the paragraph. Now, we've tried that in the past, just to tell them that, show them one, and then pray that they get it. But we might have to break it down instructionally, particularly for struggling students, spend maybe even a few days on this topic so that they know first that what is a topic sentence, Then they know how to have sentences and pick out the topic sentence. And then we might work on, I give you a topic sentence and you generate details to go with it. And then I give you a topic sentence and you add details, and then you transpose that into a paragraph. So down at the bottom there is forever my motto, particularly about students in Tier 2 or Tier 3, teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Everybody's saying it with me. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. So here we have on the left-hand side, we have the quality. Thus we have quality for everyone. We focus on critical content. That is what leads to equality. And on the right side, what we might have to do when students have special needs and need equity. And this is through the prism, through the lens of looking at it instructionally. All right, number 2. And none of these are going to shock you because they're exactly what you would come up with. We also provide, and read it with me, provide quality, engaging instructional lessons that yield learning. Not occasionally, but every hour, every day, every week, every month, for eternity. We provide quality, engaging instructional lessons that yield learning. And so this is for everyone, general ed, special ed, elementary, secondary, new immigrant children, English language learners, that they are all going to walk in our building, walk in our rooms, and know that's exactly what they're going to get. And we are going to use what we know about good instruction. So we're going to use explicit instruction, procedures that would directly tell students how to do something, would directly tell them the meaning of something, so that we can ensure through very effective procedures that they would learn it. And we're going to let them know our learning goals, and we might do that by giving them a learning intention and success criteria. And then we are going to guide them in the initial practice of the concept that we are teaching, and we're going to monitor their understanding and give them feedback. And we're going to also add scaffolding as necessary. All right, so that came as sort of a summary from the book that I wrote with Charles Hughes on explicit instruction. But it gives us a roadmap, a picture of what quality instruction would look like. That there would be learning goals that were evident, there'd be modeling, that we would have guided practice, and we would monitor and give feedback and provide scaffolding. Now, sometimes embedded in this is a practice that is very, very good if used appropriately. But let me just take monitoring. And so I'm teaching a lesson, and I say, everybody, please write this problem on your whiteboard and leave it down. And then when I say put it up in the air. But even so, that would be really good practice. But if I said write on it and allow them to immediately put it up, see, the problem there is that some students would simply copy it. They wouldn't actually think about it. So when we have procedures that definitely could lead to equality, we have to be careful to do them as desired, because if not, then not all children benefit. Now they've given up thinking, now they've just abdicated to someone else to write it down. So as we go through this, we'll pinpoint those things that, if not done well, might lead to lack of equality. Well, provide quality, engaging instructional lessons that yield learning. So I'm certain that from whatever source you've got it, you know I do it, we do it, you do it. Actually, in 1977, I wrote a manual with a number of colleagues on effective, efficient instruction, explicit instruction, and we coined the words I do it, we do it, you do it. It was sort of at the time where Madeline Hunter was talking about demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. And so we wanted something that was more memorable, and I do it, we do it, you do it was perfect. Now it is everywhere. And sometimes we add to it. I do it, we do it, you do it with a partner, and you do it on your own. So that is the kind of sequence that whether I am teaching primary children or I am teaching secondary students, that sequence might occur not always in one day, sometimes over time, but it would occur. So what does that mean in terms of equity? So everyone's getting this, but some children need more. For example, maybe the instruction, even though it is explicit, needs to be given with more clarity. More clarity in terms of how we're describing things, how we're demonstrating things, the directions we are given. Clarity, clarity, clarity. In Hattie's work, one of the highest effect sizes is on clarity. Or we might need to increase the amount of modeling. So many students, if we were teaching something, let's say it was a comprehension strategy, after 1 or 2 dynamic demonstrations, they have it and are ready to practice it with you. Other students might need more modeling. But then we have to be careful, because if I simply do this, and I've seen it sometimes, maybe I'm a special ed teacher and I think, oh, I have such low performing students, I better do, I do it, 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 I do it. Unfortunately, while you're getting better, they're not. So we don't want to overdo it, but there might be some students who need more. Certainly, the next one, if you have your paper out, put a star next to it, because if we're looking at equity, many children would need more guided practice. That would be that maybe the teacher did it a number of times with the whole group, and most of the kids are ready for independent work, but the teacher might have to pull off some students because they're not yet facile with it, good at it, and give them more guided practice. And we might need to increase the amount of independent practice. And all of us who have taught low-performing students know that they often need, as Sharon Vaughn said, from 10 to 30 times as many practice opportunities as other students. And then we might add additional scaffolding. So when I was in Australia on Saturday, we were talking about teaching students reading in terms of informational text. And we talked about the kinds of scaffolding we could give them. And just take that. We're doing informational text. Now, all of the students might benefit from some front loading. I'm going to teach you necessary background knowledge. I'm going to teach you necessary vocabulary. And I'm also going to teach you to preview the material. And then we start reading. And most of the students, I could have them read a paragraph silently. We could go back and then break it down, and I could ask them questions on it or have them generate questions. But then I might have students for that same passage that they would need even more scaffolding. And so, for example, I demonstrated how we might have to have them read a paragraph silently, and then we go back and read it orally, but we don't read the whole thing orally. We stop after a sentence or two, depending on their needs, and that's what it's all about in terms of equity, in terms of their needs, and we break it down and ask some questions on that. And of course, if we do that kind of scaffolding, which that would be a great deal of scaffolding, we have to have that gradual release of responsibility. So if you're catching my aha in that, if we look at it through the lens of teaching, the whole equality, equity, there's equality that we're guaranteeing everyone, but then we have to meet the needs of individuals in terms of equity. All right, well, number 3, this is my favorite and makes the most difference, that we actively involve all students in responding throughout the lesson, making learning visible. Read it one more time with me. Actively involve all students in responding throughout the lesson, making learning visible. You know, John Hattie talks about visible learning. Well, you have to say it, you have to write it, you have to do something, because only then can I know if you've learned it, if it's visible. Only then can I give you feedback. Only then can I adjust my lesson based on it. Only then can I decide should I go forward or not. So in my manifesto, we would have as one of the items under equality that everyone is going to respond in the lesson. I just wish I could have you respond more, but if you just do the active participation with me, you too will be more present and learn more. So down at the bottom, I just wrote out one of my favorite mottos in regard to active involvement. Learning is not a spectator sport. I know some of you from your names that you work in high school and secondary settings, and you know some children who come to class believe that if their body is in class, they've met their entire obligation. But that does not necessarily mean that they are learning. So let's look at this a little deeper. So this is just a summary sheet of the possibilities in terms of active participation. And all of them have been used often. Many of them have been research validated. Now I put some in red because here's a case where we have a good practice, but if it is not used in the way it was designed, then we'll end up with a practice that is not demonstrating equality. Okay, so let's take the first one, choral responses. I could have students say answers together. Now, if I want to follow what would be optimum, I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to give them a time to think, and then I'm going to have them say it together. And sort of like making a beautiful choir sing in a classroom. Possibility is, though, if the teacher doesn't have a cue or doesn't have a signal, doesn't direct it like the choir director, and the kids just blurt out answers, then what happens is that one student blurts it out first, and other students simply mimic that idea. And so everyone is not participating that in terms of thinking the idea and saying it. Many kids are just simply honing in. We've even watched them, particularly in the elementary school, where the teacher will say, everyone, and some kids turn and look at Grace, who is the high-performing blurter in the room, who shouts out the answer already, and they simply copy that idea. And then when she's absent, children panic because that's her job. I feed the plants, you take care of the hamster, and Grace answers all questions. So we have to be careful that if we want quality, that we are doing practices that bring it about. Let's talk about partners. Let's say that I've assigned partners, and you are partners, and occasionally in the lesson I'll say, turn and talk, turn and talk, turn and talk, turn and talk. Then we will have if I did that, I'll end up with a practice that doesn't have equality for all, because one person will dominate, and inevitably in every relationship, there might be someone who dominates. But if we structure it, and we give them 1 and 2, and we say 1's tell your partner, 2's tell your partner, then we have equality. So now, I had a great gift a few weeks ago listening to a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Kevin Feldman, and he made a point that I have not stressed enough. He said, if you want structured partners, you must give a role to both partners. You might say, 1's tell your partner, 2's you're going to agree or disagree and say why. 1's tell your partner how these are similar. 2's tell your partner how they are different. That if we want total equality, everybody involved, then we have to give both the speaker and the listener a definite role. So, thank you, Kevin. And so already I've changed my practice when I've been in classes and when I've been doing trainings. No one will be without a job. So let's go down to the next red one. And so if a teacher does the most common practice in American schools, I believe in Australian schools, Canadian schools, of this. I teach some information, I ask a question, and then I have kids raise their hands, and I call on a volunteer. Who am I going to end up calling on? Would it be the highest or lowest performing student? Highest. Would it be the student that is assertive or shy? Assertive, right. Would it be a student that is one that is a English student who has become very good at English or emerging in English? Probably the proficient English student. That's what the research shows on this, is that if I ask a question, open it up to volunteers, students raise their hands, I'll end up calling on the highest performing, most assertive student, most proficient in English. See, we've taken a good practice that had equality for everyone, and because we did it in a way that led to focusing on some students, it did not meet the needs of all. So we need a way to randomly call on them. Sticks in a can, index cards in an envelope, but some way to randomize it. Now the next three that are in red in front of you, whiteboards, response cards, hand signals, are what I call the hold-ups, where the student writes on their whiteboard, they hold it up, the teacher can monitor and hold everybody accountable. They have response cards, maybe agree, disagree, or something like yes and no, or information. So I was doing an exciting lesson on grammar, and they had has, had, and have. Oh, it was a thriller. And so they had those in front of them, and they had a sentence. They had to pick the right verb, and then they had to touch it, and then hold it up. Maybe they use hand signals. Yes, they could use agree or disagree, but most often what we do is have numbered information on the screen, and then they pick which one it is going to be. Is it going to be 1 or 2 or 3? All of them called holdups. All of them have, when done the right way in terms of equality, the teacher would say, write it on your whiteboard, but do not put it up until I say, show me. Then they hold it up. Touch your response card, now hold it up. Put your fingers on your table, now show me. So just as a reminder that we have to use the very best practice. What was the intention of the procedure? And are we doing that so that everyone has to think about it? They're not just watching someone else's whiteboard. They're not just watching someone else's response card or hand signal. Why did I tell you to put a star by this one? And it's really because it does make the most difference. I see it again and again. If we can increase the number of responses in our classes, that we will have a significant gain in terms of academics, that we make it totally interactive. I say something, you say something, I write something, you write something. So if we look at it in terms of equality, we actively involve all students in responding throughout the lesson, making learning visible. But if I have students that have other needs, then I have to respond to it. I have to have equity. Maybe I have to increase the opportunities to respond in the small group instruction. Maybe I have to increase the amount of thinking time. And so that they are given thinking time and they show me if they are ready with an answer. I might have to add additional structure to responding. Not too long ago, I was in a primary class in Klamath Falls, Oregon, in a great school, Mills Elementary School. And one teacher, to get her students in kindergarten more responsive, she did this. When they did core responses, she said, put your hand on your head, think about the answer, and then she said, everyone, and they all went like that. Not just the teacher signaled for it, the students signaled for it. Well, it was amazing to see how on task they were. And she had modified her practice that she needed more structure. Another thing we might have to do to have equity is we might have to prepare students for responding. Well, all students need to prepare, but we might have to even pre-teach information so that the students do better within our whole class instruction. But this is one to absolutely focus on, is ensuring we have active participation throughout the lesson. Well, what else did I add to my manifesto here? So read this with me and go. Carefully monitor students' responses, adjusting the lesson as necessary to ensure learning. Well, that means that we're going to look carefully at their responses, whether in a large or small group or even tutoring, one-to-one. And we're going to listen carefully to what they say because we have to know how to adjust our lesson. Should we go forward? Should we go back? Should we give more responses? And sometimes that means that we have to move out, circulate, and monitor. It was on Friday when I was in Australia, in Brisbane. I had a huge group, but luckily I was wearing my watch, and there I was teaching adults, but still there. I had to monitor when they were talking to partners, monitor when they wrote down things, but I got my 10,000 steps in. So no gym for me. I don't go to the gym anyway, but I do try to circulate and monitor. Walk around, look around, talk around. Say it with me, everyone. Walk around, look around, talk around. So I'm going to guarantee that no matter what class you're in, elementary, secondary, special ed, general ed, ESL, no matter what class you're in, the teacher is going to elicit responses and monitor them very carefully. But we might have to meet some of the needs of individuals, and for the purpose of equity, we might add more. So here is what we might do for all classes. And so we're going to listen and look. So if they do core responses, we're going to listen, homing in on low-performing students. If we are doing partners, we're going to circulate and listen to their responses, or if they're writing, look at their responses. When we call randomly, pulling that stick out, we are going to listen carefully to the student, and all the other peers are going to be directed to listen carefully. If we have those response slates and cards and hand signals, we are going to look very carefully at that to adjust our lesson. If they're doing written responses, again, we're going to circulate and look, or an action response. So this is what we're going to do for equality. I just love the fact. I don't know how in all these years I've missed the fact that quality was embedded in equality. Slow learner. All right, so how might we have to adjust it? Well, if I have students that are low-performing students, I'm going to have to monitor them more frequently because they might have more probability of errors, and then I might have to adjust the lesson more. I'm going to have to really listen carefully. Every small group that I have with special needs students, I'm going to have to listen very carefully to all of them to ensure that learning is occurring. And then all groups, I'm going to have to adjust the lesson. But if I have students that are at risk for them to have equity, meeting their own needs, I'm going to have to really be responsive to the feedback that I see and decide to go forward, decide to reteach, decide to add scaffolding. I hope you could tell I had kind of fun working on this project of what my personal 7 big points would be. And next, that I'm going to provide affirmative feedback and informative feedback to support learning. Recently, a colleague of mine said, you know, we've always used the term corrective feedback. And, you know, adults and children, humans, egos, don't like correction. And said, he told me, I'm using the term informative feedback. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to rewrite the whole book on explicit instruction to change this one thing, because it is meant to inform you. You have an error here, and this is what we hope for. And the whole purpose of feedback particularly corrective or informative feedback, is to lift you up to that point, so that to fill that gap between your current performance and desired performance. I'm going to inform you what you could do to improve your responding. So I might give feedback to individuals, and I often talk about peck, that I could praise or affirm you, I could encourage you, and I could correct or inform you. And that might involve just telling you the answer, or it might involve guiding you through that strategy we're working on, that vocabulary, that rule application, so I could guide you through it. But certainly, when you look at, again, Hattie's work, look at how high the effect size is for feedback. And so it's varied over the last few documents, but usually about 0.79, 0.80 on a continuum to 1, high effect size. So no matter what group I'm teaching, I will be giving feedback. But, so in all tiers, affirmative and informative feedback to support learning. So this is one of my favorite mottos. See if you get how clever it is. Feedback feeds back. Maybe I'm the only one who thought that was clever. Feedback feeds back. So when I give you feedback, and maybe it is informative feedback, and now you know how to have that higher accurate performance, it feeds you. So feedback feeds back. Okay, we'll work on it. But we do know that for equity's sake, for some students need, 1, more opportunities to respond. And so when they have more opportunities to respond, they have more opportunities for praise, they have more opportunities for corrective feedback. So we might even break it down in finer pieces for them to obtain. We give them more opportunities to respond, which leads to more feedback and more praise. Now, if we're out monitoring, one thing we would want to do is to provide that feedback to students privately and quietly, so we don't take away the attention of other students that are working. I like this, quality and equity. That's what we're about. That's what all of us are about. Equality and equity. Equality for all plus equity to meet the needs of individuals. Well, that was number 5. And what is number 6? And this is all about practice. And so, you know, what's fascinating is this is one of the areas we have the most, lots of research on. What makes good practice? And yet, I still see practice sort of demonified in American education, where we basically say things like, well, that is just drill and kill. As I've always said, we have not one reported incident of children dying because of practice. Maybe I'm teaching a group in algebra and I say, you know, we need to do one more item that is parallel to this. And all the kids are dead. It just doesn't happen. And so, but practice research says it's so very related to the outcomes for students. So I'm going to guarantee, whether it's special ed or general ed, whether it is elementary or secondary, that we will, under the umbrella of equality of instruction, that every child will get and will provide deliberate practice, retrieval practice, and spaced practice. The 3 biggies in terms of research on practice to lead to learning. For example, deliberate practice means that it is goal-oriented, that the teacher or yourself has established a goal in the practice. You're not just doing it again and again, but you have intentionality in terms of improving your performance. So if a teacher says, 3rd graders write a paragraph about this character, Well, they're writing a paragraph, but what are they to work on to improve? Versus a teacher says, you're going to write a paragraph about this character, and here are some areas that you're going to cover in terms of the character, what was their role in the story, and what were some of the personal attributes of that character. Those two are you going to focus on, and you need a topic sentence, and all the other sentences have to go with the topic sentence. And today we are going to really work on flow, and that means we're going to use transition words. Big difference. Writing a paragraph versus focusing on a topic sentence, focusing on related details, focusing on transition words. So all of us gain if we are intentional. And spaced practice. So spaced practice just simply refers to the fact that not all the practice would be massed into one session, that it would be done over time. Many authors have concluded that if we have spaced practice versus mass practice, that we will double our gains. Now, some of you know that when I turned 60 many years ago, I decided to take up the cello. And I'll never forget this day. So on Saturdays, I have an appointment at 2:30 to see my cello teacher. But the 1:30 teacher, or 1:30 student, we start on the same day. And so I often go early to listen to my friend. So one day I'm sitting outside the door of Hamilton's office, my teacher's office, with my cello, and I'm listening to my friend play. And it's only 3 years into our cello experience, and she is playing by memory one of Bach's concertos for cello. And it's beautiful. In fact, I can't even discern between her and my teacher. That day I was working on Ode to Joy, and my whole success criteria was maybe someone will recognize it. Yes, that was my criteria, and I couldn't believe that Annie, who is age 6, was playing so much better than I was. She must have been 7 that year. And so I went in and I said, Hamilton, why is Annie doing so much better than I am? And he said, well, Anita, and he didn't know the terminology, now he does, but he didn't know the terminology that, well, one, she practices. Oh, she practices. He said, you fly in Friday night, you come to the lesson, we play together, you fly out Sunday, and so all you have is mass practice. What you need to do is have some spaced practice over time if you want to get better at cello. So even in cello, even math, even in reading, even vocabulary, we need not to do it all at once, but maybe a week later, maybe a month later, but spaced out over time. And retrieval practice simply means that I'm going to have you retrieve some things from memory. Because as long as it's heavily scaffolded, then you don't have to learn it because the scaffolding will support you. But I've got to reduce that scaffolding and have you retrieve it from memory. Retrieve it from memory. Okay, so we know a lot about practice. Deliberate, spaced, and include retrieval practice. But how would that work in terms of the needs of some students? Again, quality for all, equality, equity for some based on their needs. So everyone gets deliberate practice, gets retrieval practice, gets spaced practice over time. But some students we would have to be more intentional about so they could have true equity, meeting their needs. For example, we might have to make even the connection greater between what I'm teaching you and what we're practicing and the success criteria, so they would know exactly what was necessary. So go back to that paragraph. So they might have success criteria that says, well, my paragraph has a topic sentence. All the other sentences have to tell more details about that topic. They have to be complete sentences. They have to make sense, and then there has to be capitalization, punctuation, and correct spelling. So making that connection between the practice and the success criteria. We might have to increase the amount of practice. And certainly those of you who are teaching children in special ed know that to obtain many things that you're teaching, that they will need significant more opportunities to practice. And we might have to have more practice that's retrieval. And not where, let's say that I'm teaching young children the names of letters. And maybe I say, we're going to go back and review. And I say, this letter is M. Its sound is M. What sound? Now, the problem there is, if it's review, you've just told them what the sound is. All they have to do is mimic it back. Versus, this is M, and what does it sound? And then we know it's M, and so they have to retrieve it from memory, get those neural pathways going, have much more retention. And it needs to be spaced over time, and they might have to come back and back and back so that they don't lose that. So the whole purpose of this is to say equality and equity. Now, you know my area is instruction, but of course, we also need to look at it in terms of management. What do we do in terms of equality and equity? If you've not recently gone to the PBIS website, they have one of the best articles on equity that I've read, and it's in regard to management. And so when I looked at this, I said to myself, what makes the best environment for all students? And so one, that we have an environment that is well organized and it is safe. You know, I just see this again and again when I had the true gift of visiting classes, that those classes that are highly structured create a safe environment for children. They know what's going to happen there, and the physical environment promotes learning, like the children are facing the teacher. They can walk around and be monitored with ease, and there are anchor charts up announcing critical processes and vocabulary they learn. They might have a word wall. The whole environment is set up to support their learning. And when we look at the research on management, we know that the teacher should teach predictable routines. I know all of you have done that. You have taught routines for entering and leaving the classroom. You've taught routines in terms of what do the students need in terms of materials. You've taught them what is the procedure for using the bathroom, for utilizing the drinking fountain. All of those you have taught them. Now, there's my motto. It's again very clever, so I hope you see that. Predictability predicts ability. So that teacher that uses a routine, and I'm talking high school students, they need predictability, that the teacher has a predictable procedure. What do you do if you don't have a pencil? What do you do if you don't have a piece of paper? What if you need to do if you didn't get your homework done in time? What do you need to do? And it really does predict their ability. And what else would I see in terms of equality? Provide clear expectations. And so that clear expectations could be in terms of classroom behavior. It could be in the moment with these directions. What are my expectations? And basically, what we expect equals what we get. So we would want to be very clear. That clarity comes up again and again. And if we anticipate a behavioral challenge, really good managers are constantly perceiving what might happen and correcting it beforehand. The power of pre-corrections. In terms of behavior. So maybe I am taking, okay, let me just show you the most recent time where I wish there had been some pre-corrections. So I had the gift of going to a children's concert. And had some little friends there who were in the choir, and the choir was lined up to sing. And right in the front, there's a boy who is going at it with his nose. And then he had a solo, and he kept doing it as he sang. And I think all the people walked away with one recall. And so you say to yourself, I'm the choir director, and I've done this before, and I can anticipate that some students will fidget, they'll talk to their neighbor, they won't look out, they won't smile. We have to take care, we can't take care of it in the moment at the concert, we can't take care of it afterwards. It's all about pre-correcting it. What if you expect it, pre-correct it? So say that with me. If you expect it, pre-correct it. So that choir teacher should have said, starting about weeks ago, let's just constantly remember what it means to perform in front of a group. We enter to our place, we stand tall, we do not talk to our neighbors, we look out, we smile, we are so warm and glad people are here. We don't fiddle with our hands. In fact, you know our position as we're singing. We cross our hands and look out unless we have to hold our music. And we keep our hands away from our face, no fidgeting at all. Then we would have had a possibility of not at all attention going to this one young man. So if you expect it, pre-correct it. And we also know that if we want appropriate behavior in terms of everyone, equality, and even more so for students that have difficulty, that we're going to acknowledge them. We're going to catch them being good. When they have appropriate behavior, we're going to notice that and put as much focus as we can onto that. So we have that ratio of 4 positive interactions to 1 redirective, and as positive as we can get. And then finally, we're going to have our lessons have a perky pace. So last week I had the great gift of having large numbers of first-year teachers, and they, in Australia, they start in January. And when I went there, it was fall. But I have to tell you, as an Oregonian, every time I go, which I've been there in fall and winter and spring, it appears to be summer. And so every time it was, the weather is so luscious. It reminds me of summer. So, but this group of students started in January, so they're just 5-6 months into teaching. And I reminded them that they better have a perky pace that moves along, whether they're elementary or secondary, special ed or general ed, because avoid the void, for they will fill it. So those were the 7 big ideas. But I loved what what the restaurant had put up. Note to self, be kind, be kind, be kind. Because through my instructional lens, I can do equality for all, and then equity as the needs arise. But every day, in every way, I need to be kind. I need to be kind. I need to be kind. If you were coming to my house, I put up the same poster right as you walk up the steps into my house for me to remember and meet it. Be kind, be kind, be kind. And as I walk out, yes, good instruction and good management, equality for everyone, and equity for those in need, but for all, be kind, be kind, be kind. So I want to thank you for being with me. And just a reminder, these are the ones that we've used over time in all of them, in the book that I wrote with Charles Hughes, but in all the programs I've been in, that how well you teach equals how well they learn, and how well you manage equals how well they behave. So teach with passion, manage with compassion. I thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Hey, Anita, can you hear me? Okay, folks, usually we would answer some of the questions that we've had. I think Anita's having trouble with her audio today, so I can't communicate with her directly. So what I'm going to do is capture the few questions that I've seen sent, and we'll send them to her after the webinar, and we'll get them answered for you in an email when we send out the saved webinar. So with that, I'll ask anybody just to kind of send me a question in their Q&A or their chat, and I'll make sure to capture it. Thank you.